Hey everybody, it's Rabbit. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the final installment of the World of Tanks vs. War Thunder series, where we will be comparing the final few elements of these two games, and also as a brief side note, the supercut that consists of all of these videos being meshed together will be up a few days after I release this final video in the series. Now, we've looked at a lot of different aspects of the vehicles in these two games. However, both games have over 1,000 vehicles each, and it's important to understand how the developers go about trying to balance the overpowered or underpowered ones. In World of Tanks, you'll generally get about 2 to 3 balance passes per year, and each balance pass will hit a handful, about 4 to 6 vehicles, with half of them getting buffs and the other half getting nerfs. These are only generalizations, however, as the developers don't seem to have a set time frame or cycle they work on. It's just whenever they decide to do it, as far as I can tell. As far as the nature of the balancing, it's typically done by adjusting characteristics. These characteristics can include everything from reload rate and armor penetration to engine power, terrain resistances, and everything in between. Vehicles also do sometimes get armor buffs, although this is less common than getting other soft stats. Since the developers seem to take their sweet time and only hit a handful of vehicles at a time, you would think they would do a relatively good job of balancing, except not really. While some of their balance changes, like with the Kronvong, do a pretty effective job of maintaining a vehicle as being viable while taking it down from being OP, you also get examples like the French AMX M454, which got buffed to the point where it became overpowered despite previously being basically useless. This in turn led to the AMX M454 also having to get a bit of a nerf, which meant the developers spent one of the relatively small number of slots they were using to buff or nerf simply to correct a previous mistake. Of course, not every overpowered vehicle gets nerfed. Wargaming really doesn't like to nerf both premium vehicles and event vehicles, and while I can kind of understand the logic that people have either paid real money or they have worked really hard to earn the vehicle and thus would probably be pretty upset if you nerfed it, it also makes for some pretty frustrating balance situations when you have to deal with the same vehicle in the same state again and again and again for months or even years. The best way to clearly illustrate the problem of premium versus non-premium balancing is when you look at examples wherein the developers decide to change a specific mechanic or a specific class of vehicles because they simply don't feel that the old design worked very well. As a practical example, the Italian auto reloaders originally had the ability to use a gun rammer because they didn't reload the entire magazine at once. They instead reloaded one shell into the magazine at a time. The designers subsequently changed their mind on this mechanic and removed the ability to equip a gun rammer to these vehicles to speed up the reload of the individual shells. However, when they did so, they technically removed it from the premium Progetto 46, but then increased its base reload so that it was essentially the same as though it had equipped a gun rammer. So it basically got the benefit of the gun rammer equipment without having to equip the gun rammer equipment, whereas all of the tech tree vehicles just got a worse reload and got no compensation for it. This kind of change obviously doesn't send the best message to the community because it essentially says we have determined that this mechanic is probably a little too powerful. However, you can just pay us money for us to overlook that. As a bit of a side note, quite a few vehicles that used to be in mainline tech trees in World of Tanks have now moved into the collector's section. These vehicles are technically available for purchase, but as far as I can tell, they don't receive any balance support whatsoever, so they just steadily get more and more power crept out of the game, and by and large, these vehicles were not very competitive to start with. While War Thunder lacks a strict schedule in terms of balance updates, it does have a pretty regular pattern in that between major title updates, you will usually have a balance update exactly halfway in the middle. Typically, War Thunder has about 5 major title updates per year, so this means about 5 balance passes per year, and basically every vehicle in the game is subject to being put on these balance updates. Sometimes they're fairly modest and only have a handful of vehicles, other times they're actually fairly massive and have upwards of 20, 30 or more vehicles on them. Unlike World of Tanks, War Thunder doesn't usually like to balance vehicles by changing their stats, instead preferring to change their battle rating as a means to balance them, so if they are overperforming, they get moved up in battle rating to fight tougher enemies. If they are underperforming, they get moved down in battle rating to fight weaker enemies. The closest thing to a stat balance adjustment a vehicle will get is if the vehicle is manually loaded, it may get a modest reload buff, because there is a bit of wiggle room in terms of how fast a human being can manually load a gun. Additionally, they may also change the types of shells it has access to, which again doesn't really change its hard stats but could change its performance. It's important to note when talking about War Thunder and its battle ratings that there isn't an actual cap to battle ratings. There is simply a soft cap that the company sets for themselves at any given time, and if the developers decide that soft cap is getting too cluttered, they can simply elevate the maximum battle rating up to try and give some more breathing room to the vehicles below it. This system isn't necessarily without its own set of flaws, however, as the statistics used to determine whether a vehicle is over or underperforming is based on average player performance, and there are basically two main issues with this. The first one is essentially the France tax. The French nation is not exactly the first one people go to when they think to themselves, I want to play really cool tanks, so it generally tends to be a player's second or third faction, and because of this you tend to have more experienced players on average playing France and other nations, but this also leads to French vehicles often being artificially nerfed in terms of battle rating, as the players themselves are a bigger deciding factor in terms of how well the vehicles do. On the opposite end of the spectrum from vehicles that tend to be played a lot more often by more experienced players, you have things like squadron vehicles and of course premium vehicles, wherein you can just throw money at the screen to have that vehicle no matter how inexperienced or low level you are. This can in turn lead to some of the popular premium and squadron vehicles having artificially lower battle ratings than they probably should. All that being said, the frequency with which War Thunder conducts battle rating changes and the large number of vehicles that generally get hit with each one means that 9 times out of 10, any vehicle you'll find in a given tech tree will be at least playable, if not half decent. We've talked a lot about the tanks, now it's time to start talking about the crews. In World of Tanks, there are 5 different crew positions. You have the commander, the driver, the gunner, the radio operator, and the loader. Each of these 5 crew positions has a certain number of skills associated with them that you can train on an associated crew member. There are also some general skills like camouflage, firefighting, repairs, etc. that can be trained on any crew member. However, it is important to note with these crew skills that you have to train them on all crew members in order to get the full effect of the skill, otherwise you will only get a partial effect. This actually applies to all of the other crew stations as well if you have multiple crew members that have the same crew slot designation. For example, if you had multiple loaders, which is the case on some heavy tanks, all of the loaders will have to be trained in a loader crew skill to get the full effect of that crew skill. This obviously begs the question, what if you have less than 5 crew members? So if your crew drops down below 5, you will often have crew members performing multiple duties. For example, you may have a commander that is also a radio operator. In this instance, if you want to take advantage of the radio operator skills, you will have to train them on your commander in addition to any of the commander skills you want to train. These are often referred to as high pressure crew slots because they require a lot more experience to get up to a basic level of proficiency with a given vehicle. To use a practical example, the Batchat 25T has a commander that is also a radio operator and a loader, a gunner that is also a loader, and a driver. This is only 3 crew stations, but it has 2 high pressure crew members, and this also means that if you want any loader crew skills, you have to train it on both the gunner and the commander, which is honestly just a lot of stress and part of the reason why you're probably not going to see a lot of loader crew skills on a vehicle like the Batchat 25T. Of course, the different roles within a vehicle are absolutely vital to keep in mind when you want to move crews from one vehicle to another vehicle. For example, in the Italian medium tank line, in the first few vehicles of that line, they have 4 crew members, a commander that is also a gunner, a radio operator, a loader, and a driver. However, as soon as you transition into the later Italian vehicles, the commander is now the radio operator, and then you have a loader, a gunner, and a driver. So you actually need completely different crews for the early and late Italian medium tanks. Of course, you can't just move a crew from one vehicle to another vehicle at will. There are 3 separate options for moving a crew from one vehicle to another vehicle. The first one is to do it for free, in which case you will take a rather substantial penalty. The second one is to pay silver, in which you will take a modest penalty. And the third one is to pay gold, in which you will take no penalty whatsoever. The only types of vehicles that you can move crews freely to and from without taking any penalty are premium vehicles. Now, this is a good time to remind the audience that these games are always in flux and always having changes made, because the exact nature of the penalty you suffer when you're moving crew members is going to change as of the next patch for World of Tanks. Currently, and for a while now, the penalty you would take is the major crew qualifications, i.e. the base characteristics of a vehicle the crew were manning would be reduced. So these are things like reload rate, accuracy, your mobility, etc, etc, etc. In the next update, what they're going to do is they're going to have it reduce the efficiency of your crew skills. This isn't technically as bad as simply having penalties in all areas. However, they're also increasing the amount of experience you need to get the crew fully trained on a vehicle, so you're going to have to spend some more quality time with a crew in a given vehicle until you get them up to the point where they can start earning progress towards their next crew skill again. The biggest observation I had about the World of Tanks crew system, other than its relatively convoluted nature, was that the World of Tanks crew system doesn't really allow you to go straight up the tech tree with the same crew, not just because of crew incompatibility, but also because if you're constantly resetting your progress towards the next skill, you're going to basically get to the top of the tree with very few, if any, skills, and having a high skill crew is relatively important to top tier. You are essentially going to have to take time out and dedicate time towards making sure you have a competent crew. It simply isn't going to happen naturally if you just try to progress forward as fast as possible. This of course can be slightly frustrating because the crew skills are absolutely vital to having an effective vehicle, as they provide bonuses to basically any area you could possibly imagine. In fact, crews are so important in the game that two of the most powerful items, improved ventilation and premium consumables, directly buff crew skills. So it is important to keep in mind that despite the crew system being somewhat odd and confusing, you will have to interact with it if you're going to have your vehicle operating at an optimum state. Now, for what is probably the first time in this video, the War Thunder system is actually a lot simpler than the World of Tanks system. You have the same base crew positions. You have the commander, loader, driver, gunner, and radio operator. However, unlike World of Tanks, you don't actually have to worry about what specific crew stations a vehicle has in order to simply train a crew on them, as you will get the bonuses for that crew member being there as long as you have it trained at all. The War Thunder crew system also focuses more on incremental improvements to stats rather than big flashy abilities, and the more you increment a stat up, the more the next increment will cost, so it's actually better to evenly spread your distribution of crew skills rather than try to hammer out something like weapon reloading or whatever. It's also notable that the repairs and agility abilities are actually averaged out among all your crew members, so you want to also keep those pretty even as well. Once you get your crew up to a certain level, you can actually expert your crew, which gives them bonuses to basically all areas for a specific vehicle. And if you already have a vehicle experted, you can earn XP towards acing it, or you can spend gold to ace it, although it does take a very considerable amount of XP or gold, so you don't commonly see a lot of players running aced crews. Now, a very important note that we kind of hinted at earlier in this comparison is that War Thunder doesn't use garage slots like World of Tanks. Instead, War Thunder uses crew slots. You start out with 3 with a given nation, you can get 2 more crew slots with modest amounts of silver, and from then on out you will have to purchase crew slots with increasing amount of gold. You can put any vehicle you currently own for a nation in any crew slot for that nation. However, it's important to note that experience is not shared across naval, air, and ground vehicles, so you might want to try to specialize certain slots in certain types of vehicles. It's also very noteworthy that while there is an initial crew training cost of silver that is unavoidable, once you have fully trained a crew on a vehicle, you can send it back and forth between any vehicle they are currently trained on basically at will. While there will be a noticeable difference in performance of using the same vehicle on a low, mid, or high level crew, it's not such a large and pronounced difference that it can't be overcome with things like player skill, good positioning, map awareness, etc, etc, etc. Now, up to this point in the comparison, we have thrown around some costs, but it's important to understand how things realistically cost both compared to each other, and of course how much you can realistically make to spend on all of this stuff. We're going to start out with a bit of a baseline comparison to let you know about how much things cost in game, and we're going to use as a comparison point the French Batchat 25T from World of Tanks and the Leclerc Azure from War Thunder, because those are 2 top French medium tanks, so they should be close enough for government work. The Batchat 25T will run you a whopping 200,000 experience points. It'll take you an additional 45,000 experience points to unlock the top gun, and 224,000 experience points to unlock all the field mods, for a grand total of 469,000 experience. Meanwhile, the Leclerc Azure will run you 410,000 RP, and it will additionally cost you 287,700 RP to unlock all of the upgrades, for a grand total of 697,700 research points for the Leclerc Azure. As you can see, this puts the average required researching for War Thunder noticeably higher than World of Tanks. Now, from the experience cost, we're going to the silver cost. For the Batchat 25T, it takes a total of 6.1 million to buy that vehicle. It takes an additional 325,000 to buy the top gun, along with 750,000 to install all the field mods, and the current equipment loadout I have on it costs 1.4 million. This is a total of 8,575,000 credits. The Leclerc Azure, meanwhile, costs 1.1 million credits to buy, 483,000 credits to buy all of the modifications, and 310,000 credits to equip a crew to, for a total of 1,893,000 silver. Now, as you can clearly see, while the Leclerc Azure required a lot more research points than the Batchat 25T, the Batchat 25T is going to take considerably more silver to get it all the way up in research and into a fully upgraded state. Next up, let's compare the cost to take both of these tanks out on a mission. The Batchat 12T, if you were to take 4 magazines of standard ammo, 1 magazine of high explosive ammo, and 1 magazine of premium ammo, you would end up with a total of 51,400 credits to take that ammunition loadout out. And if your Batchat 25T is destroyed, you will be paying a grand total of 24,123 silver to repair it. For the Leclerc Azure, on the other hand, if you were to take 20 rounds of its top shell, which is pretty standard for a War Thunder match, you would pay 4,800 silver for that, and if the vehicle were completely destroyed and you had to repair it, you would end up paying a total of 6,795 silver to fix it back up. Yet again, we see the pretty obvious pattern that War Thunder is noticeably cheaper on the silver side of things, especially as I didn't really consider premium consumables because it's kind of hard to do the math on exactly how that will impact in terms of cost, especially because some of them you could theoretically use multiple times per map or not at all. Now, obviously War Thunder is my main game, so I'm going to have generally better performances in that game than I am World of Tanks, so I'm trying to evaluate some of my better World of Tanks games versus some of my average War Thunder games, if that makes any sense. World of Tanks has some daily boosters you can use to try and buff your earnings for XP for the first wins you get for a given vehicle or your wins in general. These win bonuses were in general, in my experience, a nice way to keep a steady pace through about the first hour or so of play, in which you have a pretty nice experience return. However, after that first hour it dropped off pretty sharply, and you'll notice a lot of these are victory rewards, and I found that anecdotally on defeats that the rewards were pretty awful even if you had premium time or other boosters up. On a loss, even one where I felt like I did pretty well, I would struggle to make over 1,000 experience in a single map, which is pretty disconcerting even though World of Tanks on the whole does require less experience to progress. That being said, I still found the experience side, especially through about the first hour of gameplay, went reasonably well. The silver side, on the other hand, not so much. In addition to the game having a lot of silver sinks that you have to consciously avoid in order to earn large amounts of silver, the game on the whole just doesn't produce the silver rewards you really need to make meaningful progress, and everything from buying upgrades to buying equipment all the way up to progressing to the next vehicle require fairly copious amounts of silver that gets pretty exorbitant once you get past about tier 6. Whenever I watch videos of epic carries in World of Tanks, I always make sure to watch till the end in the recap screen to see if the individual who carried their team in a dramatic fashion and wiped out most of the enemies on their own actually managed to turn a profit, and unfortunately, more often than not, they barely make any silver in these epic games. World of Tanks does have various boosters you can activate for more silver, more crew XP, and of course more experience. However, I did find on the whole that these boosters were very limited in terms of exactly how they applied, and I often didn't notice a massive difference between having them on and not having them on unless they were the particularly large boosters, which are available a lot less often than the smaller ones. This also brings up a fairly valid point about World of Tanks boosters, in that World of Tanks boosters count down in real time, so when you turn them on you will have an hour of real time to use the booster, and once that's up the booster is gone, regardless of whether that hour consisted of a handful of really long drawn out games or a lot of really good ones. In War Thunder, I found the research points earnings that I got for modest games was roughly equivalent to what I got for a fairly good game in World of Tanks. However, what I noticed pretty quickly was that obviously you do need more of it just to do anything, so it was on average taking me about as long. However, War Thunder was a lot easier to spike and get really big numbers, and this is because of the way War Thunder has the chevron system and the boosts. The chevron system kicks in when you get a minimum of 3 kills, and then for 3 kills, 6 kills, and 9 kills, you get a boost applied to all RP earned within that match. So it's basically like a mini booster that you just activate whenever you have a match that you're doing well. And additionally, War Thunder has some very generous boosters going up to 300 or 500%, and especially with premium time and of course the chevrons, you could easily hit 15 to 25,000 with a good enough game, which did allow you some pretty good spikes to make up for the fact that War Thunder does on the whole require more research points. The silver side of War Thunder I found absolutely blew World of Tanks out of the water, as I was rarely, if ever, even coming close to losing silver in a given match, even counting restock and repair bills for my vehicles. This is probably a good time to briefly discuss the review bombing campaign that War Thunder got hit by over a year ago, in which the customers were very unhappy about some unfavorable economy changes and decided to review bomb the game on Steam pretty religiously, and this in turn resulted in the developers ultimately conceding and making a roadmap with a bunch of quality of life improvements, including the aforementioned chevron system. They also foldered a bunch of vehicles so that you didn't have to research them if you didn't want to, and those foldered vehicles now took less RP in order to research, in addition to better economy and other various quality of life improvements. This comparison actually probably would have gone very differently had I been comparing these two games before that review bombing campaign took place, because the economy of the game was in a much worse state at that point, and it is worth pointing out because it is entirely possible War Thunder could slip back into that previous and very player-unfriendly economy again. It's also very notable that War Thunder's boosters work very differently from World of Tanks boosters in that a War Thunder booster will last a set number of maps. It doesn't care about how much time it takes, or it does kind of care in that you have 24 hours in which to complete that many matches, but usually this is a pretty generous criteria. On top of that, while some of the boosters do come with a built-in expiration date, as long as you activate the booster before that expiration date, you can add another 24 hours in which to get all of your matches in to take advantage of that booster. Now, both World of Tanks and War Thunder are free-to-play games, so obviously they have monetization in the terms of both premium vehicles, premium times, etc, 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 and those all deserve at least some degree of comparison. Gold is used as a premium currency across both games, and it can be used to do a little bit of everything. In World of Tanks, gold by itself can buy some of the premium vehicles, it can also demount equipment, it can also remove the penalty for your crew skills, in addition to converting experience and also converting it to silver, so that it can be used to both buy other things in game. In this respect, copious amounts of gold can generally just make your life a lot easier. You can also use gold to buy premium time, and premium time of course increases both your experience earn and your silver earn, and also gives you more map vetoes, although I've always found it to be a questionable feature to allow your players to play less of your maps unless you just don't have any confidence in your map design. Of course, in addition to premium time, you also have the new Watt Plus. Watt Plus gives you a small influx of both silver and gold. It also lets you demount your equipment for free, so it's easier to keep your vehicles in mounted equipment, and of course it also gives you a small amount of crew XP to a selected crew every few minutes, even when you're not in the game. Watt Plus also gives you access to the TS-54 premium vehicle, and this vehicle is unique because it's the only vehicle that you can never own. It's basically always going to be a rental vehicle, and you only get access to it as long as you have Watt Plus active, and as soon as you deactivate Watt Plus, it is no longer available to you. Speaking of, while some premium vehicles can be purchased for gold, other premium vehicles are going to require cold hard currency, and premium vehicles generally enjoy better silver and experience earn rates, although as we've kind of discussed, you can't really research a tech tree vehicle with a premium vehicle unless you intend to get a lot of free XP, which is somewhat difficult, or convert a lot of your XP with gold, which is somewhat expensive. That being said, the increased earn rate can definitely be used to train your crew members that you can move to these premium vehicles for free. Of course, we also have to hit on the loot crates because World of Tanks has started releasing brand new shiny premium vehicles inside of loot crates. Now essentially how this system works is you have a set of loot crates and you are guaranteed to get a top tier premium for every 50 loot crates. However, there's usually a smattering of top tier vehicles, some of which are more desirable than others in these vehicles that you are guaranteed to get. So you're not necessarily guaranteed to get the vehicle you want, you're just guaranteed to get a vehicle in those 50 loot crates. If we were to look at last Christmas as an example, you could have gotten the XM66F, the Type 63, the GSOR 1010, or the Tiger Mouse, and the Tiger Mouse really seemed to be the one that most of the players really wanted to pull out of those boxes. In order to guarantee a Tiger Mouse, you would have needed at least 200 loot crates, and 50 loot crates seem to be about $80 US. That would be around $320 US to guarantee it. Now obviously you would have only had to spend that if it was the absolute last crate, but still that is a lot of money just to get a single brand new premium vehicle. And it's not the first time they've done it either. They also did it the previous year with the BZ176, which is currently one of the more overpowered tier 8 premium vehicles in the entire game. Of note, neither the Tiger Mouse nor the BZ176 have been available since they were offered in these loot crates, so if you didn't get them in the loot crates, you simply didn't get them. The other contents of the loot crates included some low tier premium vehicles, premium time, gold, basically all the same loot crate filler stuff that you would probably expect had you seen loot crates like this before. There were, however, some pretty fancy 3D styles in the box, including a hot rod for the EBR-105, one of the top tier 10 light tanks, and of course that 3D style, if you wanted to guarantee it, well, you just couldn't. There was no way to guarantee a 3D style, it was only the top tier premiums that were guaranteed, so you could have easily opened that 200 and not seen it. Of course, offering premium vehicles that are only available in loot crates does have a lot of fear of missing out, it also has a lot of artificial scarcity, and of course with Wargaming's reputation for not nerfing premium vehicles, if you do get a particularly busted one, you know it's not going anywhere anytime soon. All that being said, World of Tanks does have quite a few really powerful premium tanks, and the only thing that really keeps them in check is that, well, the game just doesn't sell them all that often. While the BZ176 is the obvious example, the EBR-75 hasn't gone on sale in the last year or so as far as I can tell, and the Panzer IV-5, a pretty busted tier 5 premium vehicle, also doesn't seem to show up at all basically. So the only major balancing factor to World of Tanks premium vehicles is that the game just basically doesn't sell them that often. On the whole, I would say the addition of Watt Plus and the increasing reliance on loot crates to release new premium vehicles, especially as they're coming more and more frequently, is a bit of a matter of concern for monetization for the game of World of Tanks. Much like World of Tanks, War Thunder also has gold as a premium currency, and you can also do a wide variety of things with it, everything from speeding up the research on individual vehicles, buying silver with it, upgrading your crews, and even buying select premium vehicles outright for gold. War Thunder also prominently features premium time, which has many of the same benefits in terms of increased silver earn, increased RP earn, and of course increased map votes. There is also one rather unusual benefit of premium time in War Thunder, and that is if you have auto repair and auto resupply selected in your garage, you basically can't ever lose silver on a match. The game will automatically refund you silver up to 0, unless of course you lost silver because of team killing, in which case you will still go negative. In addition to buying some premium vehicles for gold, a lot of vehicles are what's called pack vehicles. These are available for cold hard currency and generally come with both some gold and some premium time. And whenever these go on sale, they are particularly good deals because you still get the same amount of premium time and gold no matter how cheap it is. Which kind of neatly segues into the topic of War Thunder sales. War Thunder commonly has sales for Golden Eagle vehicles. They commonly also have half off sales for upgrades within tech trees. You can also frequently find premium time on sale, and they do also have pack vehicle sales, but those are fairly inconsistent, so it's not exactly something you can count on. Indeed, if you check with most War Thunder content creators, you'll see sale guides somewhere in their history, because it is a very common ritual every time a sale comes up for the various content creators to give you advice on what are and are not good buys. This also brings up an interesting point about War Thunder premium vehicles versus World of Tanks premium vehicles, in that War Thunder premium vehicles can research tech tree vehicles. In fact, one of the major benefits of a premium vehicle, in addition to the fact that it earns more and also comes with all of its upgrades installed, and additionally, unlike a tech tree vehicle, it can actually research all ranks below it efficiently. So if you buy a top tier premium vehicle, you can actually research anything in the tech tree with it without any problems, which is one of the primary uses of a lot of the War Thunder premium vehicles, is as grinders to get your way through a tech tree relatively quickly. This also kind of segues into the system of talismans, and you can pick up a talisman for Golden Eagles on any vehicle in the tech tree, and adding a talisman to a tech tree vehicle will give it the same research rewards as a premium vehicle, effectively allowing you to use a vehicle that you already know and like to research the tech tree more efficiently. Of course, any discussion of monetization in War Thunder would be remiss if we didn't discuss the Gaijin Marketplace. The Gaijin Marketplace is a place where you can go to both buy and sell items. Now, premium vehicles in War Thunder often come in the form of coupons, and these coupons can be bought and sold on the marketplace to turn a healthy profit or to try and track down something that you might have missed. The marketplace is also where a bunch of content creators go to sell skins of questionable historical accuracy. Given that a lot of the vehicles available on the Gaijin marketplace are older event vehicles that may not necessarily have a large inventory of, some of the prices can get pretty ridiculous, such as E100 selling for over $1,000. That being said, the marketplace isn't even accessible through the main game, and you basically have to go through an entirely separate website in order to use it, so it's not like it's necessarily pushed on players, even if it is kind of a dodgy aspect of the game. War Thunder has started making use of loot crates recently, first for silver and later for gold. However, the loot crates in War Thunder tend to only contain older event vehicles. Now, while these are desirable vehicles that are no longer really available, they were at least available for free at some point, so going into these loot crates isn't the only way that any player has ever had to access them, so it's not technically as bad as World of Tanks. However, it is kind of veering into that territory. Now, I briefly mentioned skins that were of questionable historical authenticity, and you probably haven't seen too many of them in my games, and that's because by default War Thunder has non-historical skins disabled, so you actually have to enable these ahistorical skins in order to see them in your game, which is kind of interesting because most games actually want these outlandish cosmetics on display so that players will get curious about them and perhaps pick them up. As a final point of comparison, it is worth giving a passing acknowledgement to the various cosmetic systems in both games, as these can allow you to make your vehicle feel unique and interesting to you personally. In World of Tanks, you have everything from basic camos and basic 2D skins all the way up to elaborate 3D styles, and the 3D styles are obviously some of the most desirable as they tend to really break up the outline and make the vehicle look unique, and in general they do tend to spend a lot of work making these vehicles look really cool with lots of small details like glowing bits and moving parts. That being said, you can go into the options menu and select an option so that the outline of the vehicle is always the base body of the enemy vehicle and does not include these style elements, which is always a good idea because I have no idea why you would want the outline to include these extraneous elements in the first place. You can also apply various decals to your vehicle, and this is also a point where we should probably discuss the fact that these various camos, 3D styles, and 2D styles aren't purely cosmetic. They do actually have an in-game effect. They give you a static camouflage increase of 3%, so there is a direct in-game reason to equip these camos. Interestingly, you can take camos and 2D styles off of a vehicle and equip them to another eligible vehicle for free, so you could theoretically go up an entire branch of a tech tree only needing one camo and removing it from the old vehicle and adding it to the new one as you go. In War Thunder, you can unlock some fairly basic desert and winter camos simply by playing the game and getting a certain number of kills in a vehicle. However, there are usually several other camos that can only be unlocked for Golden Eagles. Additionally, War Thunder does feature a lot of cosmetics in the form of various decorations that you can attach to a vehicle, not simply 2D but also 3D decorations, as you can probably tell from a lot of my footage in the background. These decorations can go all the way from relatively sane things like a teddy bear, a pistol, or a helmet, all the way up to fairly ridiculous things like a snowmobile or a working cuckoo clock. Interestingly, while the ahistorical skins are disabled by default, the myriad of fairly absurd decorations are in fact not, and you can see those perfectly fine. This is where we get to one of the more contentious aspects of the War Thunder cosmetics, and that are the bushes. Bushes are a form of camouflage you can apply on your vehicle, and they make the vehicle directly harder to see, so they do represent an in-game advantage. You can technically earn them in-game, although you do have to go through quite a few steps, and you'll probably have to look up a Wikipedia article on exactly how to do it. Otherwise, you will just have to spend Golden Eagles to unlock the various bushes, and of course the various bushes can both break up the silhouette or hide weak points on a vehicle, making vehicles particularly annoying to identify or spot. Bushes are a major source of contention among the War Thunder community and a lot of War Thunder players, but Gaijin did at least add the ability to shoot decorations off of vehicles or have those decorations be removed by explosions, so at least you don't have to deal with it for the entire match. To close this out, I'm going to give some of my overall thoughts on where I feel the games currently stand as of right now. I wasn't entirely sure going into this review and going back to World of Tanks if this entire process would either reignite my fire for the game or throw sand on the wick, but I was determined to try and keep an open mind and approach the game with at least some degree of a clear head on the matter. It must be said, World of Tanks has a very easy and pleasant new player experience. Everything from the concepts that are fairly easy to get your head around, shoot it green thing, enemy health bar go down, etc., all the way up to the fairly significant tutorialization, in addition to the fact that it also provides you with a number of maps where you can go around in different vehicle types and see relatively good positions for vehicles in that map, and on top of that it also gives you a bunch of games with bots and then an increasing number of human players before you're thrown into the matchmaker proper. The combined effect of all of this is a game that it's very easy to get started in and very easy to get a basic proficiency with a lot of the core controls. In this respect, it's pretty easy for me to understand why World of Tanks was able to find and cultivate an audience relatively quickly after its initial launch within the first few years. I do have to say that a lot of the core gameplay loop of World of Tanks and a lot of what makes it engaging is largely still present, even if there are a lot of additional systems that do occasionally drag it down. All that being said, by the time you hit about tier 6, it does start to become pretty obvious how experienced the average World of Tanks player is, and that's not too terribly surprising. The game has been going on for about 12 years, but you can reasonably start to at that point run into enemies that have fully equipped tanks, fully equipped crews, etc., and it does start to become a lot more sweaty and try hard a lot earlier than it used to. This didn't exactly mesh well with the still somewhat archaic crew system that makes it fairly difficult to build up crew skills at any real speed, and also a silver system that will keep you constantly broke and scraping up every last bit of coin for that next upgrade or that next vehicle. As you get closer to tier 8, some other issues are going to start to crop up, such as the copious amount of premium vehicles that all have wacky or eccentric gimmicks, or the concerning number of vehicles that have few or no weak points on their turrets, so you're having to basically spam gold, and even then click for relatively small weaknesses anyway. At about tier 7 is where I transitioned from free to play to pay to play, using both premium account and Watt Plus, and also some gold, and the difference was pretty night and day and very noticeable, mostly in the areas of the crew and the equipment, because I could keep my crew basically trained on vehicles at all times, and because of the free equipment demounting that I got from Watt Plus, I could constantly keep my vehicles in good equipment, and this immediately resulted in a better performance. While this bot power essentially did kind of rub me the wrong way, it didn't quite hurt as bad as when a BZ-176 would kick in the rocket booster, take off half my health points with a ram, and then shoot me in the face for 800 damage. It's fair to say that World of Tanks is probably not in danger of being my main game anytime soon. However, I did go back and replay it even after I had all the footage I needed for this video, so that should at least tell you something. I didn't completely hate the game, and I still don't completely hate the game. I feel like it has merit, and there definitely is a class of players that will definitely enjoy it. However, at this point I just don't feel the game itself is for me, at least not as a main game, more of a side game that I play once in a while. War Thunder has a much harsher learning curve and a much more uninviting new player experience, not exactly withholding information, but not exactly telling you everything you need to know about things like ammunition, where you need to aim on an enemy vehicle, etc., and this makes for the game being a very frustrating experience, especially as last time I checked, you only get about 3 games with bots before it throws you into the matchmaker proper. Once you're in the matchmaker, you're expected to know things like where is the gunner, where is the driver, where is the ammunition, etc., on any vehicle that you're shooting at, in addition to trying to figure out where exactly you want to shoot them to even get the shell inside the armor to begin with. This and the lack of significant randomness on your shots means War Thunder has a very high skill gap that can be insurmountable to overcome for a newer player. All that being said, the game that War Thunder reminds me of the most in terms of its learning curve is actually a game like Dark Souls. There is a lot to learn in Dark Souls and it is very unforgiving, but there's also a lot of satisfaction to be had when you do ultimately learn and understand the systems that it has on offer. Because of this, the Dark Souls series took a while to really catch on in Western audiences, and War Thunder likewise had a very slow boil to getting to the point where it was actually a very popular and well-known game, because it had to build up that initial base of players that would wade through all the tedium and frustration first. That being said, it is undeniably very satisfying to just take a wild guess on some really long range and nail your shot, and it's equally satisfying to sneak up behind 2 or 3 people and take all of them out before they know you're there. All that being said, while War Thunder's moment-to-moment gameplay getting some minor tweaks is always appreciated, the biggest boon for War Thunder and one of the biggest reasons why I'm still playing it is actually all of the meaningful and positive quality of life changes that came from the review bombing campaign, where they improved almost every aspect of the game. Myself and probably many others were expecting the developers to simply do the bare minimum, give lip service to the players, and simply wait for it to blow over. However, they seem to have taken a fairly strong good faith effort to actually make meaningful improvements to try and re-establish some level of goodwill between them and the player base. I also can't deny that the generally more dynamic gameplay of War Thunder is definitely more appealing to me. It may sound kind of cliche to simply click super ultra mega better than the other player, but sometimes you just want to turn your brain off and do exactly that, and I would be kind of lying if I didn't at least admit that I do enjoy taking out planes and bombing people from time to time. It is just very satisfying to land that perfect drop. This is of course all punctuated for me by the emphasis on more authentic vehicles in War Thunder, which I always appreciate seeing over a bunch of experimental prototypes. However, that isn't exactly what carries my experience with the game. War Thunder is not without its flaws, both on a technical level and on a design level, and I will never pretend that the game couldn't definitely use some improvement in certain areas, and of course the pushing of increasingly more expensive premiums and their emphasis on loot boxes over the last few months have gotten me somewhat concerned, and are definitely things that I will keep an eye on for the time being, although I don't consider them to be that bad for the game's overall health as of right now. On balance, there are simply more aspects of War Thunder that I like, both from a micro moment-to-moment gameplay standpoint and from a macro standpoint of the researching and design aspects. And that wraps up our big World of Tanks versus War Thunder comparison. Hope you guys loved it. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. That always helps out the channel. You guys have been awesome for supporting me throughout this series, and as always, don't commit the shoes.